Welcome to the next episode of Value Through Vulnerability. This is a podcast dedicated to helping put the human back into humanity. And this evening time UK anyway, I'm really excited to introduce you to Jordan Gross from Cloud9 Living. Hello there, Jordan.
Hey, Gary, how are you? So excited to be on the Value Through Vulnerability podcast. I know you said it's evening UK time. It's early evening here. I'm in New York City. It's about 5:40. And I can't wait to get started, man. Let's do this.
Awesome. Well, look, I'm really looking forward to this. So we've been connected now for a few months on LinkedIn, as so many of us do connect these days. A little shout out to Dave McGlennon for being a connector. But hey, look, I'm just really excited to get to know you more. Really excited to get to know you more. So, look, I've introduced you as Jordan from Cloud9 Living. Do you want to give us a little bit of an overview?
Yeah.
Who is Jordan? And actually, how did Cloud9 Living come into being?
Oh my goodness, that could take us the rest of the 30 minutes, but I'll try to whiz through some of it and then get to where we are now, which is this Cloud9 Living concept. So, Gary, I like to say when I was younger, I was blessed and I was fortunate to always fit in. Unlike a lot of other people who maybe be going on personal growth and development journeys, I was an insider. I had a lot of great friends. I had a great support system in my family. I was, a very good student. I was a good athlete. And for me, for so long, it was just about checking boxes and going through the motions, right? And the motions at the time were based off of what other people expected me to do and really were telling me to do. So it was, focus on my schoolwork and focus on my athletics. And then that's going to get me into a good college. And then I got into a good college. And then when I got to college, it was focus on your grades and get a good internship, right? So that's what I did. And I got these good internships. But then what I always say is that there was this little voice in the back of my head. And it started out very, very, very little and very quiet. And it was saying, do something different, stand out, be different, right? Deviate from the rest of the pack. And I tried here and there, but I really didn't for a while. So in college, I had those internships in the finance world and then in the consulting world. And that voice told me like, okay, you don't like these things. So I knew I wasn't going to get into that. But then it was, again, society saying, just go back to school, get another degree. So I went and I got my master's in management studies. If I fast forward a year or two, though, my first taste of deviating from the norm and starting something on my own was this Alzheimer's organization I started at Northwestern called They Forget, We Remember. It was really the first time I had an idea, because I always had a lot of ideas, but it was the first time I took initiative on the idea. And it was then that I attribute to falling in love with the process of just building something from the ground up and watching it grow. So that was really the first experience. And because of that, I got my master's in management studies at Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. So I was in a great environment. I was in the heart of Chicago. So honestly, Gary, I had a good amount of work to do and it was challenging, but I also had a lot of free time because there was only a couple classes at a time. So I decided to dive into the startup world and really immerse myself in creating something, right? And using what I was learning in the classroom in an experiential setting. So I started, working with a couple startup companies, and then I actually created my own startup company, which turned into another startup idea. And then little by little, this voice in the back of my head was saying like, yes, you did it. You're actually creating something on your own, you're becoming entrepreneurial, and you're going to have this different journey that is, so far off from what your peers are doing, but it's going to be so worthwhile. Didn't happen right away. So I actually, I fell in love with the restaurant world and the food and beverage space. And I was sucked in by the allure of this position that I was offered, which was a leadership and management program at one of the biggest restaurant groups in the United States. And it was a very high paying salary. I was living in New York City in an apartment that they had for me. I was in a leadership role, like I mentioned, at a very, very young age. And I had this prestigious opportunity, right? And I decided to take it. So with that, I understood and had to learn the hard way that sometimes a hobby or a passion doesn't necessarily translate over to a purpose or a career, right? So I learned that by, taking initiative. So, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But after that experience, I said, I got to get out of this position. It's not the impact that I'm supposed to be making on the world. And then I wrote my first book. And my first book was called Getting Comfy, Your Morning Guide to Daily Happiness, which was a morning routine that really showed people how I woke up and approached the day with optimism and positivity, and how I overcame a lot of the stresses and anxieties associated with really anything that was anxiety inducing. At the time, it was, my crazy, hectic corporate job that I didn't really enjoy so much, but I still was coming to it with a positive, upbeat attitude, right? So I did that for the last, year and a half, and I've had some really cool opportunities. I got to give a TEDx talk about it. I got to do one-on-one coaching. I got to write a lot of articles, and I got to meet some really amazing people along the way. So I didn't really have a strategy when I first came out with that book, honestly. So now here we are, my second book, which actually there's a really, really cool origin story from that, which we can get into if you'd like. My second book is now The Journey to Cloud 9, which is really, it's a fiction book, actually. It's creating a personal growth and development book with a fictional spin, based off of events that may or could happen, but definitely aren't real. So that's what I'm up to now. And it's really describing the journey of living this Cloud 9 life. And for me, it's about the life that I've chosen to live, the story that I've deliberately crafted for myself, so that I can look back in, 40, 50 years from now with absolutely no regret. So that's what I'm doing now. It's turned into, I've got this book that's in the works. I've got this website. I'm doing coaching. And now I'm going on these awesome podcasts, just like this one, and talking to people about what I'm doing. So, yeah, I told you it could be long-winded, but I tried to skip over some things in there.
No, thank you so much for sharing. I think it's such a rich history. First of all, I've got to say, I was actually in Chicago 2 weeks ago, and what an amazing city.
Oh, okay.
What an amazing.
How'd you like it?
Loved it. Absolutely loved it. But what I think is really interesting for me, Jordan, I definitely like to explore this Cloud 9 concept you're developing. But the way that you listen to those voices, because I'm someone myself I'm 42 years old. I didn't listen to those voices for a good 2 decades. I knew I wanted to do something different, wanted to make a difference bigger than myself, but I lacked the ability to listen to those voices. What was it for you what do you think it is within you that you grabbed hold of that quite early in your life and your career?
Yeah, so I attribute it to 2 things. One, I would actually say the overarching society that I and we currently live in. I think in a more general answer, there's just a lot more information, stories, exposure to this idea that we can grab control and take the reins on our life starting right now, right? And I think you do see a lot of younger people. I'm 24 at this point. I think you do see a lot of younger people who don't have the responsibility, who don't have the wife and children, who don't necessarily need to be making hundreds of thousands of dollars to support themselves right now, taking that risk and taking that leap into this kind of world and listening to those voices in the back of their head. So I would say that's number one. But number 2 is my sphere of influence and the people who I surround myself with, and really the things that I surround myself with. So it was, a lot of it is attributed to one, the support that I actually had from my parents to say, go do this. We'll be your biggest fans no matter what you do. But 2, it's the podcast that I was listening to and the books that I was reading in this personal growth and development world, So I actually like to say, Gary, it's funny, like my aha moment or my light bulb moment was actually the realization that I didn't need an aha moment or a light bulb moment, because I'd listened to all these stories, right, of these quote unquote influencers in the personal growth and development world, the New York Times bestsellers, the people with thousands and millions of followers. And I think so often you hear that it was a time of devastation or tragedy when they decided to take control of their life, right? And for me, like I mentioned in the beginning, I've been really fortunate and really blessed to have an amazing life and not have to experience anything too traumatic. So I said, why wait for that perfect or imperfect alignment of the stars? Why not go ahead and right now, while I'm in a great place, take control of the direction of my life? So that's what I decided. That's why I decided to listen to the voices. And once I decided that, it took some exploration and it took some trial and error. But now I realize it's about the full immersion into the world that I want to be in. And I think I've found the quote unquote purpose for me right now.
That's awesome. So if you're going to speak a little bit more about what that purpose is, how would you, we've just met as we have today, what does that mean to you? If you're going to describe to me one sentence or two or a paragraph, what is that purpose of Jordan?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this a lot recently because I'm talking about Cloud9 all the time. People are saying, oh, you must want to make people happier. You must want to have, people experience these intense feelings of euphoria. And for me, I thought of this the other day, and let me know if you like it, honestly, because it might be my tagline at some point. But I just want to evoke any sort of emotion from one other person every single day. And the reason why I don't say something like I just want to make somebody smile every single day is because even in hearing all these stories every day about Cloud9's all about happiness and really, living the lives that we want to live and the moments that we truly remember and look forward to. And even in hearing those stories all the time, people expect me to always be happy or always want to be happy. But I actually don't think that's what it's all about. I think it's experiencing the full range of emotion in order to make the happy moments that much happier, right? So that's the way you can elevate your feelings of euphoria, is by experiencing the sadness, the frustration, the anger, all of these things. So I don't want to just make people happy. I want to make them feel something that really makes them change their normal direction of their everyday life.
That's beautiful. Jordan, no, you've asked me the question, and I think it does come up for me really powerfully, actually. You're speaking about evoking a shift in whatever that emotion is. 'Cause you're right. There is, rightly or wrongly, there's a lot of movements out there, positive psychology, you're looking at neuroscience. There's no good or bad. We all make a choice as to how we want to live our lives.
Yeah.
What I really like about what you're talking about there is that, you're not looking to try and influence anyone. It's almost like you're trying to create the space and the awareness for someone to experience every emotion such that their life is richer, not necessarily happier, but richer in themselves. Yeah. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, you're so right. And a lot of the times I think of, what's the opposite of extreme happiness? Extreme sadness, right? And I think so we can get to my book later if you want to talk about it. But so basically, in my book, there are moments where I specifically want the reader to cry, right? I'm building a sad story because I think after you experience that tremendous sadness, one, not only do you learn so much about emotions, but two, you can so much more appreciate those happy, amazing times after you've been all the way down on the roller coaster. You can get even up higher. So yeah, it's definitely, it's not just about this one thing. It's not always about smiling. It's about everything. It's about all of the emotions.
I really do, generally, I really do love that experiential angle. And it's interesting because when you introduce yourself, Jordan, for the listeners, it's really fascinating because you was very quickly to go down that experiential route, how you learn, how you grow, how you wanted to experience in that startup. So there's this very clear, for me, golden thread of experience within you, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think experiential learning is not the only thing we should do. I think the books are important, but there has to be experiential learning as well, or else we're never going to know how to apply anything to our real lives.
So if I may ask, what was an experience or maybe a mix of experiences that you had that provoked you and your emotions to want to write this book?
To want to write the Journey to Cloud
Yeah.
Nine?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love this story. It's the origin story I mentioned, and I'm always pumped up about this one because people asked me why I wrote the first book, Getting Comfy, and there was no like really cool story behind it. But this one, there is a cool one. So this was back in November of 2018, and it was a really introspective weekend. So I had just finished reading Mitch Albom's book, The Next Person You Meet in Heaven, which is a sequel to The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. And also an acquaintance of my friend group had passed away. So there were just a lot of thoughts running through the mind. And it was a Sunday football day, and I was out in downtown New York City. I live in Midtown. And we were just, talking about normal guy stuff, watching football, American football, by the way, Gary, for a while. And although I do love football. But anyway, we're just talking, and then the conversation got deeper than normal. And we started talking about life, and we started talking about death, and we started talking about friendships and happiness and love and all these things you wouldn't expect 24-year-old guys to talk about on a Sunday football day. But it was really quite fascinating to hear everybody's opinions. And on my ride home, I was in an Uber, and I'm always the guy who, like I mentioned before, I want to change somebody else's day. So if you think about an Uber driver, somebody who is driving people around all the time and often just sitting there in silence because so many of us just want to sit in the back of the Uber and not talk to them. I'm the guy who always wants to talk to them. But today, after these conversations, I just kind of wanted to let the thoughts simmer and sit in silence until we're driving on the East River in New York City on the FDR Expressway. And I saw a boat in the river, and the boat happened to be called Cloud Nine. Now I look at the boat and I say to the Uber driver, like, "Oh, Cloud Nine, that's a cool name for a boat." And he's like, "Oh yes, very much so." And I just blurted out, "So what does Cloud Nine mean to you?" And his responses were so fascinating. And they are a lot of the chapters in the book. So he's talking to me about the day he got married, the day he had children, the day he was able to make enough money to send some back to his home country. He talked about, his favorite childhood memory. And my wheels started turning about this Cloud Nine life we could all live based on these transformative life experiences. So that's the story. And after that, you mentioned positive psychology before. I was in this state of flow that I'd never experienced before. And I outlined the book in a matter of 2 days. And then every day I wrote a chapter, and then the next day I'd research, and then I'd write another chapter, and then I'd research. And I put together this whole manuscript in about 5 weeks. I was done by New Year's Day with the first draft. So that was the story. And it was all because I didn't just sit in the back of the Uber and sit in silence. I changed that guy's day by having a conversation, which I think so many of us forget all the time. So that's the story, and that's the experience that really, led to the Cloud Nine movement, which is now so much more than just the book.
Wow. Well, I'm certainly buzzing as you described this, Jordan. Honestly, I can really picture,
Yes.
I can really picture that conversation. I can really picture it. And I think what's really powerful for me, certainly in relation to this podcast, is that deep present humanity that you shared with that Uber driver. Because as you say, so, in this, literally every moment we live our lives, every breath that we take is an opportunity to connect. And I think so often these days with these devices, we choose to connect by social media or by non-face-to-face means.
Right.
And I think for you, not just because you're a young person of age 24, but you intentionally said, actually, I'm going to connect with this other human being today.
Yes. Yeah, that's so true. And it's that simple. It's really that simple.
It's just absolutely beautiful. So you mentioned it's part of a movement. So the book's one thing. And when is the book coming out, Jordan, out of interest? When's that due to come out?
So the book, I just signed with a publisher. So maybe 6 to 9 months from now, we've got a whole long process of editing and marketing and everything like that. But now I want to get the word out in prime time, which I think is a couple of months in advance, right? So that's why I'm doing this podcast journey. So that's when the book's I don't have an exact date yet. So 6 to 9 months is what I'm saying at the moment.
Okay. And you referenced a movement. So this book is one part of that. So speak about that movement a little bit more. How else is your Cloud9 life amplifying right now for you?
Yeah, totally. So at first, like I mentioned, I thought that Cloud9 was just these transformative, euphoric experiences. And it's actually so funny, Gary. I'll add to the story. A couple of days ago, I was running the same route on the East River in New York City. And I passed the Cloud9 boat, which I do a lot of the time, but I saw flyers on the fence that separates the running path from the water, so you don't dive into the water. And I took one of the flyers, and it said Cloud9 Charters. And I called the number of Cloud9 Charters, and I said, hey, this is probably the weirdest phone call you're going to get today, but your boat has inspired me to write a book, make a website, go on 90 podcasts in 90 days, and like start this whole journey to Cloud9 Living Company. And we actually had a great conversation after that. And the woman ended up telling me that it's called Cloud9 because on that boat, that charter boat, they have events like weddings and bar mitzvahs and baptisms. And there are these memorable experiences that people have on their lives, during their lives. So that's why they want people to feel like they're on Cloud9. And that's initially all I thought Cloud9 was going to be, just this book where I highlighted some key life events based on what the Uber driver said, what I thought, and what some people told me. But as I talked to more and more people about their Cloud9 moments and their Cloud9 lives, I realized that I had to relay to others that Cloud9 was attainable every single day. That Cloud9 didn't have to be this grandiose, 7 to 9 times in a lifetime euphoria, but rather a Cloud9 moment throughout your day could be a morning run. It could be this podcast conversation. It's just something that I have spoken to so many people about that is it's their pinnacle of their day. And you have to have a pinnacle of every single day in order to perform optimally, even in the most dire of circumstances, even in the most stressful of days. If you know that at 7 p.m. you're gathering around your dinner table with your family and that's your Cloud9 moment, you know that that's going to elevate your day, right? So that's what Cloud9 has also turned into. It's people's interpretations of what Cloud9 means to them and how they reach Cloud9 every single day. And I'm trying to help more and more people who haven't necessarily gotten there yet to understand how they can reach Cloud9 on a daily basis and throughout their lives. So that's what the Cloud9 movement's turned into.
It's really, really interesting for me, this, because it's really fascinating because quite often, my origin story, I was bullied as a kid and whatever, and that's fine. It doesn't define me, but that's my origin story. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. Mm-hmm. We talk about it. It's part of my story. And that's fine. But what I love about what you're doing with Cloud9 is, like you say, you came from you was included, you were good at sport, you were good academically, but you still knew that there was something better. There was something more enriching. There was something more internal to live from, rather than this external world of the things and job titles and money. So we're all pointing, I feel, Jordan, the same way, which is back to this inside view of ourselves mattering more than what the outside view looks like.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Gary. And if for the sake of vulnerability, I'll share with you that just because I was an insider in, my relationships and my athletics and my academics, I actually, growing up, I can send you a picture if you want. I had this long hair and I was commonly mistaken for a girl. I was cross-eyed, so I wore these big funny glasses. I was overweight and people constantly made fun of me for that. And like we mentioned before we got on the podcast, my last name is Gross. So people were already saying ew before they even knew who I was, right? So I had the opportunity to view myself as an outsider, but I chose otherwise. And from a young age, I realized that I had a choice, and I decided to use those seemingly negative characteristics as assets, right? So I was bigger than everybody else, sure, but I used that to my advantage at sports, right? I was, let's say, I was cross-eyed and I wore these big glasses, right? So I already looked the part of somebody who was academic and studious. So I decided to say, you know what? I'm going to get good grades. And then, my last name is Gross, right? It gave me an opportunity to be a funny guy. So I would tell everybody, yeah, it's gross, it's disgusting, ever since I was a young kid, right? And people would laugh with me rather than at me. And, nobody could see me right now, see you and I right now, but I have short hair. So I ended up, cutting the long hair at some point.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And
Yeah.
I really want our listeners right now, to hold on to that point about choice, because it's funny, I delivered a session this afternoon at my work organization, Jordan, around improving self-awareness and how powerful it is to be assertive and to own your power.
Yeah.
And for me, choice is a lot about that, because we can become, can't we, a victim. It's so much easier to stay in the dark and to believe everyone else owns that power for us. And what I'm sensing is Cloud9 is all about owning that power of choice in many ways.
Oh, 100%. It really is. Cloud9 is making the choices that you want to make, that you have within your heart and within your gut and in your intuition, rather than making the choices that society expects you to make and the people around you want you to make. So you're absolutely right. Couldn't be more spot on.
Oh, that's beautiful. So what's your hopes? So when this book comes out in 6 or 9 months' time, if you could wave a magic wand as Jordan, what are you hoping the future is going to look like for people living their Cloud9 lives?
Oh my goodness, I have so many hopes, but really for me it's about a daily dose of happiness. It's about a daily dose of emotion. It's about a daily dose of inspiration. I want people to use their Cloud9 moments in order to have this understanding and this realization that everything can be okay if they have something to look forward to, if they have these moments in their lives that truly allows them to feel a different way than they were before. So that's it, very simply. And I want everybody to have a Cloud9 moment, when the book comes out. And it's about interpretation of the book. And that's why it's fiction, actually, is because so much, and you mentioned, like I said before, you mentioned positive psychology, right? And I think in positive psychology, in self-help, in personal growth and development, there's a stigma associated in which people are telling other people what to do based on research or based on studies or quantitative analyses of this and that, right? But with Cloud9, and the reason why I want to really spearhead a fictional personal development type book and type movement that's all based on anecdotes, is because I want people to take away what they want to take away rather than, what I say goes. It's not that at all. They're recommendations, not demands. So I want people to think after they read Cloud9. I want them to think about their lives, and I want them to make their own conclusions.
I'm already going to say thank you for what you're doing with this book, because I'm really actually excited to get hold of it myself. Really, I really mean it, because the way you just so eloquently just described that, I think it's right. I do read a lot of self-help books, a lot of development books. I do find them interesting.
Yeah.
But there is definitely, and it's funny, I'll put a shout out to a colleague, and I'll connect you to him actually, Piers Thurston. Okay. He's a consultant, and he does a lot around what he calls quality of mind, which is actually, let's be honest here, it's actually spiritual. It's actually getting back to knowing that there is something bigger than all of us. And actually, when we start to look inside of ourselves more often, for those moments that you're pointing us towards, everything opens up, because you drop the anxiety, you drop the fear, you drop that I'm not enough, I don't have enough, I'm not good enough. And that all comes from this fear of not conforming, for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. It's so true. Yeah.
So get the book out quicker is my message.
Oh, well, that's why I'm doing everything with the platform and on the website and sharing the Cloud9 stories and going on, having these kinds of conversations, because I want people to know what it is. And then the book is just like a special prize at the bottom of the box, right? That's what it's all about.
Yeah. So what else are you doing as we start to look to wrap up, Jordan? What else are you actually working on? You mentioned you do some coaching. Of course, you wrote your first book, Getting Comfy. What's your sort of breadth of work? I've also seen you've done volunteering in the past. You mentioned about the Alzheimer's work that you did. So what's Give us a little bit more about those experiences or those moments every day for you that help you stay in cloud nine for Jordan.
Yeah, so my cloud nine is all about adding value to others, without expecting anything in return is what I like to throw at the end of that. But so yeah, I've always, since that junior year, starting the Alzheimer's organization, it's really been all about impact. And for me, how I want to be remembered is based on the impact I made on the world, not the amount of money that I make. Right. So that's why I've done so many different things, is because I fear the what if more than I actually fear the process of doing something. I fear looking back with regret and saying, I wish I would have done that. I wish I would have done this. I won't ever look back and say, you know what, I regret that I had that restaurant job. Like, no, not at all. I learned so much from that, because whenever you go about and you experience something, even if it's something that you don't end up pursuing, even if it's something that you end up hating. In my coaching, I actually ask people to go out into the world and do something that they hate, right? Like, I always use this example, but like for me, I don't hate it. I don't hate anything, but I dislike or I'm uncomfortable with like dance classes, right? So I've taken dance classes to just learn what I can pick out in those experiences that I do enjoy, right? So yeah, for me, it's all about taking everything as they come. And it sounds cliche, but really taking every failure as an opportunity, taking every rejection as an opportunity. So that's why I've tried to do so many different things. But yeah, like you said, so getting comfy was what I did for the last year and a half. And, I just gave a talk about that. And I've talked to a lot of high schools and colleges and companies about how they can. So it started as a morning routine specifically, but now it's really a mental preparedness tool. COMFY, comfy, is an acronym for calm, openness, movement, funny, and you. And openness is all about vulnerability, by the way. So that's why it's such a good fit with what you're talking about here. So yeah, I help people, get mentally prepared for, say, a public speech, an interview, a big exam for students, things like that. And then the Cloud Nine coaching, it revolves around finding purpose. So for me, it's funny. I coach people in finding their passions and purpose, right? But I don't even know if that's possible. I don't think it's totally possible to find that with a coach. I think I've provided a framework for how you can go about doing it by following your curiosities, becoming extremely self-aware, by doing something that you love, out in the world, and then also doing something that you hate, by talking to the people in your network and understanding things about yourself that you may have overlooked. So I can do that with people. But, again, it's up to the individual, her, himself, to interpret what it is that's truly going to light them up at the end of the day. So, it's tough stuff, but it's truly, truly like nothing else to see somebody's face light up when they realize what it is that they truly want, and then start to go after what it is they truly want. And then even, I've had people who have gotten what they truly want. So that's really, the icing on the end of the cake.
That's awesome. Well, it's only been the last 18 months for me that I've sort of clarified. For me, it's similar to you, Jordan. It's around helping, I call it, awaken the innate brilliance of every individual, because we're all brilliant. We're all brilliant already. But back to your point about socializing, I think from a very young age we socialize ourselves away from believing we're good enough or we have choice, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Even from the education system, you're starting to fit in a box. By the time you get to the world of work, you fit in another box. So like, it's sort of, I love what you've done about breaking all those down really early on and saying, hey, I'm bigger than that box, and I'm going to step out of that box, and I'm going to be the best version of me outside of that box. I think it's so powerful, Jordan. Really.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Gary. Thank you so much. Thanks.
So how can people get hold of you if they want to follow up, not only on finding out more about the book, but maybe more generally your coaching services, or just to connect with you, because you're a great connector on LinkedIn as well?
Thank you. So simple, journeytocloud9.com. And that's all spelled out, journey, TOCloud9.com. And on there, you could learn everything about me. My contact info is on there, and I answer every email, every call. Like you said, connect with me on LinkedIn. But the most important thing, in order for me to spread Cloud9 how I want it to and provide these daily doses of emotion, is to sign up. Just throw your email in, and every Tuesday and Thursday I send out somebody's Cloud9 moment, which is the description of them feeling that moment of euphoria, either on a daily or throughout their life, throughout their lifetime. And that's what you get. Yeah. So journeytocloud9.com and throw your email in there.
That's so awesome. And I really appreciate you, Jordan, not only for what you're doing, but also for giving me a challenge. And I'm going to put it out there now on this podcast. I'm going to have the courage to try something that I would normally dislike. So I'm not normally scared of stuff, I'm honest.
Yeah.
I've gone out of my way intentionally to do something that maybe is going to put me into a fear state or that I'm going to dislike. So I'm going to take that as an action and really think about something to step into in the next couple of weeks. So thank you.
Nice. I love that. Please keep me updated. I want to know what it is.
Awesome. Well, look, I'm going to make sure that all of your contact details are on the show notes. And Jordan, you're an absolute pleasure, and all the best with the book.
Gary, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks so much.